Serious, parents of Reddit, what was a legit reason why you didn't let your son/daughter have that friend over go to a sleepover? My friend and her sister could sleep at our house but my sister and I couldn't sleep at theirs. In college I figured it out. Their house was a fire trap. Pathways between stuff like a hoarder's house. The bathtub was full of dirty water constantly. You had to move stuff just to use the toilet. The stairs to the basement, where we would have slept, covered in clothes and only one way out of the basement. The windows were too small to crawl out of if you were larger than an average 2-year-old. Saw the inside of the house years later and it was like a different house. They had a piano in the living room that I'd never seen before because it was just covered in hoarder crap. One of our friends has a granddaughter who was treated horribly by her parents. They ignored her and just locked her in her room. When she was young, it wasn't that bad when she came over. She would act out from time to time but she was just so happy to be somewhere else and you could tell. It made us feel wonderful that we could provide that and we did so often. We tried to basically make our house a second home for her. However, as she got older, she started acting out more and more. It reached the point when she was 7 that she was stealing money from our child's piggy bank. She got into my wife's purse and stole money. We then caught her stealing toys to take home with her. She would run around saying frick you, frick Jesus and all sorts different ways to say frick. We'd take them to the park and she would get into literal fist throwing fights with other kids. These sort of things started happening every time she was over. It went from we feel so great that we can give her a break from her troubled home life to sorry but she can't come over anymore and we felt awful. But she had turned into a little terror and nothing we tried would get her out of it. The turning point was when she smacked our youngest across the head with a wooden toy and he needed to get stitches. We tried to get CPS involved but they basically said as long as she's going to school, getting fed, and not being physically or sexually abused there is nothing we can do. Last I heard she is in prison for assault and drug charges. Early 90s, the kids on the street decided to have a camp out in someone's front yard. Little fire, ghost stories, s'mores, tents, the whole bit. Middle of the night one of the kids starts screaming that someone is on him. Turns out another kid that just moved in had stripped down naked and smeared crap all over himself and attempted to do something to a sleeping kid. Parents all came out after hearing the screaming. Poop kid took a dump in the street and threw some at the parents of yet another kid. Again, it was the early 90s in the Midwest, so this display didn't go well. The parents went crazy. I never saw the poop king again and his family moved away. Pretty sure kids who play with their own poop have had serious abuse. Poor kid. My daughter was the one excluded, so thought I'd add it as almost like a SAR. My kid has alopecia. For those that don't know, it's an autoimmune disease that causes your immune system to treat your hair follicles as a threat. Boom. Hair loss. Hers is stress induced, and she went completely bald. Eyelashes and eyebrows too. For almost 2 years. One of her friend's parents wouldn't let her go over there because she said she didn't want my daughter to spread her disease to her kids. She said this to my kid's face. For one, that's uncalled for. She had my phone number. Call me. 2. IT isn't contagious. My daughter cried for days. Kid has severe behavior issues and is super violent and destructive. The one and only time he came to our house he threw all of my daughter's underwear around the room to embarrass her. The worst incident happened at school though when he tried to choke her out. They were 5 years old at the time. I feel bad for the kid and all and I know his mom is doing everything she can to help him but I just can't allow that kind of behavior around my kids and in my home. I no longer allowed my son's best friend to come to our place or for him to go over to his after the best friend's mom reported us to the police as harboring a runaway. This was after the best friend had been tossed out of his mom's house and told to spend the night sleeping outside and she'd refused our phone calls to find out what was going on. So yes, I wasn't going to let a 16-year-old spend the night in 30-degree weather with nowhere to go. Sue me. The cops showed up. Said she'd reported us as harboring a runaway. We explained what was happening and got treated like dirt and told that from now on we had to have full permission from the mom. Fine. We urged my son's friend to go to the police, report to them what was happening, and left it at that. The mom tried to apologize 3 days later as being off her meds and say it was okay for my son to go to their house and vice versa, and I politely refused and hung up while she was screaming at me. I'd always been kind of uncomfortable with the woman and that just sealed it. They were still friends at school, but there were no more hanging out at either one's house, and I explained why and they both agreed to the rules. The son is in the military now and doing quite well and no longer has contact with his mother. Gee, I wonder why. Sounded like a trap. Vice versa. My son started public school after going to Montessori school in 4th grade. I met another mom whose son started from private school the same year. My son was weird about befriending her son and I wasn't sure why. Shortly into the friendship, the single mom started asking if her kid could sleep over every Friday. I was fine with that. Then it became school nights. Not so fond of that. Her son started showing up at 6:30 AM before school when we were all still sleeping. My son made other friends and just tolerated friendship with her kid. We explained that his home life wasn't great and he didn't have anyone most of the time. Halfway through the following school year, the kid brought a knife to school and pulled it on my son. The school did nothing. Baltimore. So I contacted her to let her know what happened. Her response was that he was such a goof. My son was rightfully avoiding him at this point, and the mom had the audacity to contact me and ask if we could watch her son for half a school week because she really wanted to go on spring break out of state with friends. She is in her late 30s getting a PhD in psychology. I had to tell her she and her kid were never going to be invited again. The kid that wanted to come over has been over once before and he shattered a window when he got mad, then ran to his house 3 blocks away. He is destructive and has some unmedicated issues that affect his interaction with other kids. The kid doesn't play, he just upturns bins, throws things around and breaks stuff. My son is growing out of this kid. The kid is very sheltered and doesn't have the behavioral therapy that the doctors recommend, so he is just too much for my oldest and now my second to deal with. So that means the requests for him to come over are drying up. They really have nothing in common anymore. I had to hide our Xbox anytime he came over after he broke multiple games and couldn't understand why the shattered CD wouldn't work and why we were mad. Came over to our house and ripped my daughter's brand new JoJo poster that she was so proud of to shreds. Mother did nothing. To make it worse, my daughter tried to tape it back together. My heart was breaking. My cousin did the same thing to my sister's poster. He was, and still is, a douchebag and compulsive liar as well. I know the band kid. He would break crap, hide from you, hit the dogs, and he'd be rude and physically abusive to my grandmother. He'd pinch her for literally no reason and probably little kid punched her a few times. He would scream for no reason and no matter what you did for punishment he'd ignore it. My mom physically threw him and all his toys out of our house one day after he hit a couple dogs and pinched my grandmother in quick succession. And he just stood outside and fake cried, telling us to let him back in. We live in the middle of nowhere with no neighbors or traffic. He wasn't in any danger, and if he actually thought about it he could have found his way back in. I think like an hour of peace went by and she finally let him back in. Stories from school include walking out of class and into another and then beating a kid up, pulling a girl down by her ponytail and wailing on her, attempting to stab a kid with scissors, and being such a handful the teacher tried to get him moved to a special needs school. He was 5 when all of that was going on. He's 6 now and medicated with therapy and doing insanely better. His mom is moving cross country with him to be with her family so they can help look after him. He was banned from a lot of school events and didn't have many friends, but that's turning around now. It's nice to hear that, at least in one of these stories, things are turning around for the banned child. Hopefully he continues down the right path and is able to make friends and be a good kid. Kid was on serious medication for major behavioral issues. The kid's sibling was the favorite. Parents were dump set and wanted kid at our house, without medication because it was good to take a break from antipsychotics. I say and wanted kid because he'd come over on an empty stomach and left for hours after the promised pickup time, while they took the other kid out to eat and shop. They also didn't offer snacks, drinks, and eventually banned reciprocal visits. It sucks that the parents were so crappy. Kid tried to commit suicide at one point and was institutionalized where, wonder of wonders, not taking a weekend break from medication left him much more stable. He was a complete butthole with no respect for adults. Breaking point was when he put bleach in a spray bottle and chased our 5-year-old around spraying him. His mother apologized but never again. She was a chronic liar. My daughter met her in kindergarten. She lied constantly about everything. One day my daughter asked us to help her put together a birthday card and make a homemade present for her friend's birthday. But when she brought the gifts to school, it turned out the girl had lied about what day her birthday was. I didn't want to put down my daughter's first good friend, but I refused to have them spend more time together than was necessary. I was relieved when she started ending every story about something her friend had said with, "It's probably not true though." She outgrew that friend after a few months. Met the girl's parents later in the year. That poor kid never had a chance. My daughter's best friend comes from a home where the parents are kind of a mess. Trying to explain to her why her friend can stay at our house, but she can't stay at their house without flat out saying her parents are constantly dealing with the police over domestic violence. Plus you'd come home smelling like an ashtray and get the equivalent health benefits of smoking a few packs of cigarettes is a real challenge. I was a foster mom of a girl that had lice that was resistant to all attempts to eradicate them. She had waist-length, thick black hair. It was a nightmare. I even ended up with lice eventually, and I too had long, thick, dark hair. I wouldn't let her go to sleepovers with our family kids, and it was so hard to justify that we were not singling her out for being foster. I just was trying to be responsible and made sure the parents all knew and asked them to make excuses that would not include lice. I didn't want that horror from her past life to follow her around. I know this is crazy after the fact, but if you're ever exposed to lice in the future that are resistant to lice shampoo, use a hairdryer on high heat. The lice can't take it and die off. It also kills the eggs. My daughter had some resistant ones from a cousin. Pretty sure her dad was abusive and she picked up on that hostility. I didn't let my daughter go over and she doesn't come over here because, despite me feeling bad for the girl, she spent her time in school with my kid telling her to not listen to the teachers and to be disruptive. 9 years old, if that helps to understand. Have the same situation with a neighbor. The father is a drunk and abusive and the kids have learned how to choke other kids out from seeing the father to that to their mother. They are also destructive and have no respect for other people's property. The violence. This kid just was violent to the bone. A kid tries to do anything with this kid and a moment later they are either in a headlock or crying on the floor with bruises under their shirt. I found out a few months ago he got put into juvie. Don't think he's far from a prison sentence after he steps out. He was a little kleptomaniac. He came over exactly 3 times to hang out. Each time something would go missing. No more visits. Found out recently he was recently charged with embezzlement at the company he used to work for. I'm the kid in this story. When I was growing up, there was a girl that lived across the street, about a year younger than me. I'm a guy, which plays a role in a bit. Her parents were addicted to, I believe, drugs. I one day, as a kid, saw her dad on the roof of his house grilling hamburgers while doing push-ups. Yeah. Anyways, after that, my mom would not let me stay at this girl's house, although she would still stay the night at mine. However, as we got older, my mom stopped letting her stay at our house also, because she was afraid we might start having sex. And she was especially afraid the girl might use sex pregnancy with me as a way to get out of her home situation. That's the reason my mom gave to me anyways, when I was an adult, obviously. Sadly, the girl's life never really improved. When we got to high school, she started dating this older guy who apparently doesn't know how to yield on a left turn, and she died in the resulting crash. Years later, now that I'm older and can look back on it, the whole situation makes me really sad. She never even made it to 16.
Man, I sure do love great content, and I'm working on some of that over at Updoot, man. So you should go there right now. Go there. Go if you want to subscribe to this channel, subscribe. Then go over to Updoot, man. Right there. You click right there. You click right there. You better do it. You better, so help me, you better go over there because you deserve something good. I put my heart and soul into this stuff, man. You don't even understand. No pressure.